Evidence of a soul, perhaps. Why else would it be Christianity that is so necessary for happiness? Why is religious practice tied to a happy, fulfilled, and meaningful life? Why doesn't exercise do it? Why do secular people have a hard time finding a substitute for Christianity? That is the question, and it's the question. This is the most important question, okay? Because the 20th century, and I write about this in my book, the 20th century, so many secular writers, particularly in the social sciences, and I'm thinking of Sigmund Freud, but there's so many others. And, there were some also as well, very important in the 19th century. But so many assured us, and Freud did it in Civilization and Its Discontents, that Christianity is so easy to replace. You can easily replace Christianity, and the reward for that would be greater human happiness and fulfillment, and yet we're seeing exactly the opposite. We are seeing, and I would call that, if I could call that anything, I would call the Christian substitution thesis, right? It's a thesis put forward by Karl Marx, put forward by Sigmund Freud. I'm pointing over here because I can see his book, I've got Civilization and Its Discontent staring at me, right over here. And so Friedrich Nietzsche in the 19th century, so many writers assuring us that we would be better off without Christianity. We can replace Christianity. We can find better substitutes for Christianity that would do a better job of providing happiness and fulfillment to humanity. And just the opposite is what is now in the 21st century. We're seeing that is proving not to be true. And I've written about Jean-Paul Sartre and his deathbed reconversion to Christianity. I believe he was baptized a Catholic, and I think he made some kind of a deathbed confession and recommitted himself to his Catholic faith because he was convinced that he was unable to find meaning in his life. And here's an intelligent man, a brilliant man who, admitted that he could not find meaning in life apart from the church, right? This is a consistent statistical reality that cannot be ignored. And, by the way, the last people to advance this Christian substitution thesis are the New Atheists. The New Atheists have, in Sam Harris, I know I'm remembering a particular line of his, but it goes something like this: if there's anything good about Christianity, you can get that, whatever that good thing is, you can find it elsewhere. You can find it, there's a secular counterpart to it that's just as good or better, right? But the research doesn't back that up. And so, and not only that, but we are seeing the intellectually respectable thesis in social media and in the talking heads that talk about this stuff is to say, people are becoming aware of the research showing how beneficial Christianity appears to be for mental health. But if you want to be intellectually respectable, you have to, of course, say things like, well, of course, it works. That works for religious people, right? I'm sure, something else could do it too. That is to say, if you want to be intellectually respectable, you can point out the health benefits of being a Christian, as long as you don't challenge the substitution thesis, right? And I would argue that is what you're finding from people like Ben Shapiro. And I like Ben Shapiro. I listen to his podcast all the time. But he does, the thesis that he presents, and he's not the only one. I believe Jordan Peterson gives this kind of utilitarian presentation of Christianity as well. Yeah, Christianity's good for you. Christianity does good things for you, right? And that's as far as they go, right? The point I was making in my first book is, no, it's more than that. It goes deeper than that. And that is that Christianity, and that the research, the fact, it's not just that Christianity has benefits. It's that when you subtract Christianity, the people that abandon Christianity have a very difficult time finding those benefits somewhere else. Okay? That it's the conjunction of those two things which points to a stronger thesis that is actually in the Bible, which is that Christianity isn't an option, it's essential. Okay, and I think I'm getting ahead of my PowerPoint here. So, and I make the point, as I made in episode 1 of Soul Science, that religious observance right now is at an all-time low at the same time that the CDC reported that we broke some kind of a record for the most suicides in a year back in 2022. And so we're really seeing this perfect correlation. As religious observance in America goes down, mental illness and suicide goes up. So, and as I said, this is exactly what you find in the Bible. The Bible's thesis about Christianity is not that it's an option. It's a good plan. It's a good option. But there are other ways you can do it too, right? It should be understood that the Bible does not promote the substitution thesis, right? It does not say that in the Old Testament, the prophets do not say, oh yeah, Judaism is really good, but worshiping Baal's pretty good too, right? The substitution thesis is roundly rejected, Old Testament to New Testament, right? There's no room for the substitution thesis that was promoted so strongly in the 19th and 20th centuries, and really is one of the primary foundations of the social sciences, really. The social sciences really were built on a foundation of anti-Christianity, that they found a substitute, they found a replacement for Christianity, right? What we're finding in the 21st century is, no, they didn't, actually. No, they didn't. Let me read to you from Galatians chapter 5, verses 22 and 23, a very famous passage. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such there is no law. That's quite a list right there. And as I pointed out in my book, Thomas Aquinas also makes this observation. Many of these qualities are the qualities of good mental health. Certainly joy, right? Peace of mind, self-control, gentleness, love. All of these are going to be associated with a person that enjoys good mental health. Subtract these things, and mental health, as you can see, human flourishing would be impossible without these things. But St. Paul is telling us in Galatians that these qualities are the fruits of the Spirit. And he wasn't saying, well, they're the fruits of the Spirit, but they're also the fruits of a good morning jog, right? Of reading a great poem when the sun comes up, getting out there and with your smoothie and organic, of course, and seeing the sunrise and having a good vigorous jog. All of these things, maybe getting a facial in the afternoon, a good visit to the sauna. Those are also, these qualities are also the fruits of a good vigorous jog. No, right? No, they're the fruits of the Spirit. These are the exclusive property of the Spirit, is what St. Paul means to tell us. And I would say that, the suffering of mental illness in the Netherlands, clearly they're interested in gymnasiums, since they're turning their churches into them, but it's not working, is it? Right? And so the 21st century, neuroscientists, epidemiologists, there's so many people studying this question. They are finding that Freud's Christian substitution thesis, and also Marx's and Nietzsche's as well, fails. It just the data doesn't confirm it. It actually points in the opposite direction, right? So let me read this to you. The fruits of the Spirit in Galatians 5 constitute an essential element of what Pope John Paul II called the moral psychology of the Bible. I talk about this at length in my first book. This concept of the moral psychology of the Bible, I call it BMP, Biblical Moral Psychology, in my book. I really develop this idea, and I look at all the research that backs it up. But my point is that the fruits of the Spirit enumerated in Galatians chapter 5 is really a foundational text for what John Paul II describes in the theology of the body as the moral psychology of the Bible. And so part of that moral psychology is to assert, as is really asserted by St. Paul in Galatians, which is that there is no substitute for Christianity, because there's no substitute for the Holy Spirit, right? That's a foundational tenet of the Bible's moral psychology. And this is the reason why I believe that John Paul's theology of the body is one of the most important texts of the 20th century. But it's just been treated so poorly because he divided it into two books, and one book is probably 500 or 600 pages long, and the other one is about 100 pages. And so everybody just quotes, and I think probably they just read book 2 and they ignored book 1, but book 1 is so important. And anyway, in fact, I would argue that he's really a very important apostle against cultural Marxism. He spoke very well against cultural Marxism. He doesn't use the term cultural Marxism. He doesn't use that term, but he's definitely addressing cultural Marxism in book 1 of the theology of the body. He describes Karl Marx along with Friedrich Nietzsche and Sigmund Freud. He describes them as masters of suspicion, following a French theologian. Anyway, I'm not going to get into that. We're trying to draw out a certain line of thought here to help us understand the crisis of mental health in the West, and hopefully save lives, and hopefully save Zoraya's life. And so, if you're going to sum up the Bible's message, if you're going to sum up the moral psychology of the Bible as John Paul described it, love and happiness are spiritual, and essentially so, right? So that without a spiritual life, love and happiness are going to be hard to come by, namely impossible. And so that brings me to an article that was just recently published. In fact, you can see, if you can read the URL link, it appeared in the Atlantic this month, beginning of April. And what it does, take a look at it. Can you see the graphic up here? The title of it was "The True Cost of the Church-Going Bust," by Derek Thompson. This article has been discussed all over the place, but I really want to focus on the subtitle. Okay. His subtitle, which if you can't read it here, I've got it on another screen here. Many Americans seem to have found no alternative method to build a sense of community. Okay. And, he writes this as an epiphany, right? He's writing this as an epiphany, as a realization. And so this is a quote from Derek Thompson. This is how he starts off the article. And I think this is just illuminating. This is heartening for me to read this and see that, I see light bulbs going off in the secular world, this is a good thing. He says, and you can follow along on the screen here, as an agnostic, I have spent most of my life thinking about the decline of faith in America in mostly positive terms. Organized religion seemed to me beset by scandal and entangled in noxious politics. So, I thought, what is there really to mourn? Only in the past few years have I come around to a different view. Okay? And that different view is really summarized. It's really summarized in the subtitle. Okay? And maybe you can see it better here. Here's the subtitle. Many Americans seem to have found no alternative method, in highlights here, to build a sense of community. What Derek Thompson is getting at, right, is, this is what I highlighted, no alternative. Derek Thompson, the light bulb that is going off, and this is what hit Jean-Paul Sartre at the end of his life. No alternative. A couple months ago, I was writing about Ayaan Hirsi Ali's conversion to Christianity, very famous new atheist, who had the same epiphany. No alternative method. No alternative, right? Secular people are starting to dawn on them. They're starting to recognize a truth contained in what John Paul II would call the moral psychology of the Bible, which is to say, Christianity ain't optional, okay? There is no alternative to Christianity. There ain't no substitute for Christianity. And that's what Derek Thompson is that's what Derek Thompson, a self-proclaimed agnostic, is starting to recognize. That's what Ayaan Hirsi Ali wrote about when she described her conversion to Christianity. That her life as an atheist left her feeling hopeless, and that life was meaningless. And she turned to Christ. She turned to Christianity, as did Jean-Paul Sartre about 30 years before her. I think that, Jean-Paul Sartre is a smart man. I think Ayaan Hirsi is a brilliant woman. Derek Thompson is a smart guy. These people, I think they could help the Netherlands, okay? I think these people need to understand, and they can help that psychiatrist, right? They can help that psychiatrist over in the Netherlands. You know what? Yeah, there is something you can do. You gave up because you never considered Christianity, right? It wasn't even on the table as an option. So what we're seeing here is an epiphany dawning on more and more secular people that we were sold a bill of goods in the 19th and 20th centuries with the advent of the social sciences and their cultural critique of Christianity, which is sometimes summed up by conservatives called cultural Marxism, right? But, I think in a lot of ways Sigmund Freud was more important and more influential, certainly on the West. And I think Philip Rieff, the famous American sociologist, would agree with me on that. I think John Paul, actually, it would be interesting to know what John Paul II actually thought about that. So we're starting to hear this, and I wish more conservatives would hear this, right? I pushed this line in my first book, and I pushed it at at Duke Medical School, right? You wouldn't a lot of pushback, let me tell you. They would not hear what I was saying. I mean, these people are open-minded, right? And research-based. I mean, these people are all about the research, but you cannot challenge the substitution thesis. It's okay, right? It's okay to say, it's okay for you to cite research, to quote research, which shows that there are health benefits associated with Christianity. But don't you dare suggest, okay, don't you dare suggest any challenge. Don't challenge the Christian substitution thesis, which says, per Sigmund Freud, Karl Marx, and Friedrich Nietzsche et al., right, that there are plenty of substitutes out there, and also that was also the new atheist thesis. Anything good in Christianity, there's a secular alternative out there that's just as good and better. Okay? The data is not confirming that. It's actually showing the opposite. And what we're getting is we're getting hard data showing that from places like the Harvard School of Public Health, but we're also getting these anecdotal accounts from people like Sartre and forgive my, Philistine French. It's terrible, I know. But anecdotal, accounts from Ayaan Hirsi Ali, from Derek Thompson, from Sartre, from Albert Camus, from Tom Holland, who wrote the fantastic, brilliant book Dominion, right? Many, more and more secular people. Oh my goodness! And I left out, and he's not on my presentation, but just recently, Richard Dawkins, right? And I'm wondering if this has something to do with Ayaan, if Ayaan is starting to have an impact. Tom Holland and Ayaan Hirsi Ali are starting to impact the atheist agnostic community, because Richard Dawkins came out in an interview and announced himself to be a cultural Christian. Okay? People are seeing the benefits of Christianity, and some people are walking away from this idea that there are adequate substitutes. Okay? And Jordan Peterson needs to, start, considering that. I would say the same for Ben Shapiro as well. There's a tendency to speak in reductive terms, and that's the intellectually respectable thing to do. Ben Shapiro will talk a lot about, what religion does. He speaks very anthropologically about this. Well, what religion does is it supplies a strong moral code, right? We have a strong moral code, and then it provides a sense of community. But if you want to belong to the community, right, you have to uphold the moral code. Well, yes, all of that's true, right? But that's not just true of religion. That's true of La Cosa Nostra. That's true of every street gang in Los Angeles, right? That doesn't get you to beauty, truth, and goodness, right? You've got to go deeper than simply a strong moral code and belonging to a group, right? These reductive explanations, they sound intellectually respectable, but they don't go far enough. They are inadequate. And the data, the implication of these things is, as long as you have a strong moral code and you have a strong group affiliation, then everything's good. Well, that's absolutely not true, right? That's inadequate. And also, what it sneaks in is the substitution thesis. Everyone can rest assured. Well, okay, which is what happens in my comm box, right? Lots of people who are not religious comment on there. Well, that's fine for you Christians, right? That's fine for you Christians, but that's not going to work for me, right? Is what they say. I don't know. Well, okay, so this is what the psychiatrist has really found, right? People are finding that Christianity has mental health benefits. What did the psychiatrist tell us? He said, I can't help you. That's right, he can't. Because what the psychiatrist is telling his patient, Zoraya, is that psychiatry doesn't have an alternative to Christianity. He's sort of inadvertently admitting what Derek Thompson pointed out. There is no alternative. And psychiatry doesn't have it, right? There is no substitute. And that's what really the psychiatrist was telling Zoraya. What the psychiatrist neglected to tell Zoraya, okay, and this is terrible, right? Because this is hard data. What he neglected to tell Zoraya was that back in the day, when the Netherlands was still a Christian nation, right? The Netherlands of Zoraya's grandparents, they didn't have these mental health problems. Mental health was much better. The people from the Netherlands were much happier when they were Christian, right? But Mr. Psychiatrist neglected to mention that fact to Zoraya, but it's a fact, okay? It's a fact that the Netherlands was a happier country when they were Christian. It's a consistent statistic across, many countries, and many studies confirm this, okay? And just consider this. If research shows that there's no alternative Christianity, as the Harvard School of Public Health seems to be showing, right? I mean, that's what the Harvard School of Public Health is showing. People that go to church, right, they've got strong mental health. But the people that don't go to church, that's where they found the suicide, the high rates of suicide and depression, which means that all the things that secular people were doing, whatever that was, if it's going to the gym or belonging to the bridge club or, bowling, whatever it is that secular people do, it isn't effective at combating depression and loneliness. It's not good for healing anxiety disorders and overcoming hopelessness, right? Whatever secular people are doing, it doesn't seem to be helping. All that exercise they're doing in the Netherlands by converting their churches to gymnasiums, it's not working, even though there's research. There's research that shows that exercise is beneficial, but clearly not beneficial enough, okay? All of this is pointing to a foundational principle of what John Paul called the moral psychology of the Bible, which we find in Galatians 5, that the fruits of mental health are the fruits of the Holy Spirit, making Christianity essential, right? Not merely optional, essential, okay? That was my thesis in the book. You can see that's my first book there, The Immoral Landscape of the New Atheism. I called it the grace hypothesis, right? And this is the thesis which rejects Freud's substitution thesis. It rejects the substitution thesis of Sigmund Freud and Karl Marx and Friedrich Nietzsche. The substitution thesis of Karl Marx and cultural Marxism, which says that religion is an opium. It's some kind of false. It's merely a drug. It's inauthentic happiness, right? The research is actually showing that it's not inauthentic, that it appears to be the only source that people are able to find. And the way I put it up here on the screen, grace is oxygen for the soul, right? We can't live without oxygen. It's not like you can't just put anything in your lungs, right? And expect to live. And the same is true for your soul. You can't just put anything into your soul. Your soul was made for God. Your soul was made for Christ. Your soul was made for the Holy Spirit and all the beautiful fruits that come from communion with God, communion with Christ, communion with His Holy Spirit. It's grace. It's grace in the soul that supplies that secret spiritual ingredient that's necessary for living a fully human life. And what people find when they leave the church, what they find is they can't find anything to fill that gaping spiritual hole in their soul. And St. Augustine wrote about this so eloquently. He said that our hearts are restless until they rest in God. Right? Very famous quote. So anyway, and this book, my book, just really brings forward so much research to support this and to really attack the substitution thesis, that you can find alternatives to Christianity. And I was going at it. I at the beginning of the book I address Sigmund Freud, but most of the book is aimed at Sam Harris, and the New Atheists, who also advance the substitution thesis, that you can find substitutes. You can find substitutes for Christianity that are superior to Christianity, or can even, I'm saying you can't even, the research shows that not only can you not find superior alternatives to Christianity, you can't even find ones that meet it, right? They're absolutely inferior. And so, that I want us to come back to Zoraya, right? Because, this isn't about winning. This is not about winning arguments, okay? And that, I don't always know how I come across. I drink a lot of coffee every day. I am caffeinated. I try to go to church every day. I drink coffee every day. And so I am, I hope I have the Holy Spirit. But I definitely have a lot of caffeine in the soul as well. So sometimes I can come across as kind of hyper. And, but this isn't about winning an argument. And the thing that I've said over on my blog is I'm the father of 4 kids, okay? My oldest daughter is just, she's just a few years younger than Zoraya. In fact, she kind of looks like Zoraya. They got the same beautiful blue eyes. Dark hair, and my kids, sometimes they come home from school, and they talk about their friends. In fact, I mentioned in one of my, I can't remember if I mentioned it in a podcast or I mentioned it in the I think it was in the com box of one of my blogs, just this year at my daughter's small Catholic school. A young man committed suicide, right? This is personal, okay? I belong to, and it's true, we do have a lot of community. I got to tell you, I've been Catholic all my adult life. I've lived a very, strong Catholic life. I go to early morning mass every day, and there's a large group of Catholic men about my age. We're in our 50s and 60s, and we like the early morning mass because then we can go to work afterward, right? So it allows us to go to mass, and there's even time. The 7:00 mass, there's enough time. Mass gets out about 7:30. McDonald's is right down the street, and we all qualify for the senior coffee. So we get the senior coffee, and we shoot the breeze at each other and fight with each other and argue about all kinds of things. But let me tell you something that has come up is that every single one of my buddies has a kid who has been directly impacted by the mental health crisis that we're going through right now. If it's not one of their kids personally, it is, close friends of their children. And some of these stories are heartbreaking. I'm not even going to get into some of the details, but some of them are absolutely devastating stories. So, and I've also mentioned, we live very close to NC State, North Carolina State, which the news over here about the number of deaths on campus from apparent suicide is heartbreaking. It's nothing. It's off the charts compared to when I was in school. Let me tell you, in the 80s, we were dumb. We were dumb kids, but we were happier. We didn't have a lot of the problems that these young people are going through. But I love my kids. And I love my kids, and I love my kids' friends too. And I love, my friends' kids, and they're, we're always praying for each other's kids, right? And when I look at Zoraya here, I just think about my own daughters. I've got 3. And a son, if there were some way, I could reach out to her, I would say to her, don't give up, and I would say, I know I sound preachy. I look like that old preachy guy, but I'm not just telling you, this isn't just priest stuff. This is not pulpit stuff. This is Harvard research that I would, want Zoraya to know. If she's had a secular life, I'm not going to blame her for not taking religion seriously, not taking ministers seriously. And I'll say, religion has gotten a black eye over the past 20 years, and a lot of it is well-deserved. So I can't blame a lot of these young people for being turned off by institutional religion, you know? So, this is not about winning arguments. It's about saving lives and about saving souls. And I wish I could, share this with Zoraya. This sort of summarizes it, right? It's not, I'm not telling you what a priest says. In fact, I got to be honest, I go to church every day, right? You never hear a priest talk about this stuff, okay? The people that should be talking about this are never talking about it, okay? I don't even know that they're aware. Are they even aware of this research? Research shows that the mental health crisis in the West is connected to the loss of Christianity in people's lives, right? Utterly refuting the Freudian, Marxist, Christian substitution thesis that there are alternatives out there to Christianity, just waiting for people. It's the proverbial apple in the garden, right? It's a temptation. It's tempting to think, right, that there's something out there that's more beautiful than Christianity, that doesn't demand so many sacrifices, right? That's the temptation, right? That there's some alternative out there that doesn't demand so much, doesn't have all the rules, right? But a century of research is proving that to be false. So so what is the healing plan for Zoraya? I mean, if somebody could show her, point her the way to, point her the way to the church. But if she was raised in a very secular family or what have you, point her to the research, right? Point her to the research from coming out of Harvard and so many other places that shows that going to church is good for you. That religious practice is associated with better mental health. So a healing plan for Zoraya, I think it begins with us, right? Those of us who are religious, we can begin by praying for Zoraya, right? People who know Zoraya can reach out to her, and if they belong to a church, they can invite her to their church, or they can urge her to find a church of her own. If there are young adult groups in near her, somebody should encourage her to find a young adult group, a Bible study. My oldest daughter, during Lent, it just heartened me so much to, she was involved. She's had her girlfriends for a number of years. Some of them went to the same Catholic high school over here, and they've all graduated from college, but they've kept in touch, and they're back here living locally with jobs now. But they had a Bible study, during Lent. I thought just a beautiful, way to practice their faith, and it didn't involve any of us crusty old adults. It was this group of young ladies reading the Bible and sharing their own experiences as young women, young Catholic women. They also went to confession together. They would, pick a day, meet at St. Michael's, the local church, get in line, go to confession. And, I think it's been wonderful for my daughter Sophie and for her girlfriends. And I think it would just do a world of good for Zoraya and maybe many of her friends in the Netherlands and so many Americans, right? We need to, I think the bottom bullet point might be the most important for some of our young people, right? Even though, you could tell them about the prodigal son, right? The parable, what's the message of the prodigal son? Of course, the message of the prodigal son is, right, that when you leave the father, right, life, father being a symbol for God, life doesn't go well, but you can return to the Father. You can return to your Father. You can return to Christ, and you can find healing in that. So you can tell them that parable, but if it doesn't work, try the Harvard research, right? That's what society respects these days. So yeah, this psychiatrist needs to get a hold of that Harvard research. If I knew who the guy was, I'd find him on Twitter and say, hey, pal, you need to read, do some more reading out there. And so I want to end, on a religious note. And you'll understand the photo. This beautiful photograph comes from Pixabay from Felix Mittermeier. You can see the credit here on the screen, but I know someone who can help Zoraya, right? And so what I want to do is I want to conclude with a brief Bible study for if I could talk to Zoraya, after I told her all about research from Harvard University, I would invite her to do a Bible study, maybe not with me, I'm an old fuddy-duddy, but maybe with her girlfriends, right? And I chose as the theme for this Bible study, the tree of life. Look at